Okay, here we go. Welcome to our Think Thursdays webinar series. I'm Susan Franceschini. I'm the Executive Director for ThinkLA. So happy you could join us today with so much going on. We're happy you're here with us. A few announcements before we get started today. I want to remind everybody to visit our ThinkLA website for upcoming webinars and information about membership. Also, make sure you sign up for our newsletter. We do have a lot of great articles and great resources there for you during this time, so please be sure to do that. I'm really excited about today's lineup. We have an amazing group of advertising agency leaders with us to share their perspective and insight into how this pandemic is impacting our industry and what that could actually bring to us, what opportunities may emerge. Our panelists today include Imwalle from RPA, Naseemuddeen from Omelet. We also have Melissa Palazzo-Hart from Lee, and Erin Riley from TBWA Chiat Day. And our moderator today is Freeman from Zambezi. I want to remind everybody during the conversation, if you have questions, go ahead and use that button down at the bottom of your Zoom window, the Q&A button, and we'll address those at the end of our session today. Thank you again for being here. We're getting ready to get started, and I'm going to turn things over to Jean to kick off our conversation. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Susan. I'm your moderator for today, and I think I officially have the easiest job because this panel that we have, we do have some questions to go through, but I think the conversation is really just going to flow really naturally. So thanks everyone for today for taking the time, because I do think this is a time that we can all learn from one another. We find ourselves on opposite sides of the tables at times competing against one another, but today is really about learning. There's a lot of things that we've gone through and have still yet to come. So thanks for taking the time and really appreciate it. I think LA has a specific way of operating. I've always thought that this community is much more inclusive. And I think we can kind of be an example of that as we kind of move through the next few weeks and months as the new normal comes to be. So what I'd love to do first is just have everyone go around, just do a quick check-in on, how you're doing. Thaz, why don't you start?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's nice to be here. And so I'm the CEO over at Omelet. And, I think this is, everyone has used all the words at this point. It's unprecedented. It's the new normal. It's all these things. And I think a lot of us have just been in, we've all gone through the stages of grief. And I think, we went through survival mode. We're now in sort of okay, I think we got the hang of this, but I don't know if we can do this forever mode. But I think we're really, really fortunate to have great people. And I know everybody around this table feels the same way. That's really kind of come together and supported each other and made a very strange global pandemic feel like something that actually can bring us all together versus kind of feel really distant. So I think I'm feeling pretty fortunate right now.
That's good. How about you, Melissa?
Well, about 5 minutes before this call, my 6-year-old daughter came in here having a meltdown, letting me know that this was really hard and she's really struggling. And I think it's so important to be really transparent and authentic about the struggle right now, because I think so many people are feeling that. And there's incredible opportunities. One of my colleagues this morning shared a quote with me from a woman, Dixon Boxey, and it said, "The world will never be the same again." And that's really good for those of us who were never really happy with the status quo. So I am feeling incredibly excited about what's possible. And I have to continually reset my mindset, because there are so many unknown variables right now, which can be exciting or also scary. So for me, what I'm really working on is looking in the direction of what's possible. I'm making sure that my glasses are not dark all the time, and really continuing to focus on what's good and what's possible, while just being really transparent about the struggles of being a working mom with a working dad and a child who is in kindergarten, doing the very best we can.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I think there's a lot of conversations that we've had specifically about working parents and what everyone is going through, and knowing that we can just do the best that we can with where we are right now. Erin, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Melissa's just speaking to my reality. I have a kindergartner also and a 1-year-old. So someone said to me, "Oh, all this anxiety, you mustn't be sleeping." And I was like, "Girl, I haven't been sleeping for a very long time anyway." So, it's just adding to it. I mean, I've really been struck by like the dichotomy that I feel in every given day. There are moments where I have all this gratitude for, a little extra time with my family when it's not crazy. When I think about just the outlook of advertising people, we are prone to be optimistic, to think about possibility, to solve the problem, to sort of come together. And I've been really grateful for all of that. At the same time, in the next breath, I'm feeling really dismayed about all the things that we used to be able to trust that we can't trust anymore. The idea that our humanity is such a big part of our culture, and now we're so separated. And that our business was going through such massive transition anyways, and I feel like this is another moment of a potential reset that could be not to our advantage, as clients sort of seize this moment to right size our relationships and lean things out. And so I start to think about, well, what does recovery look like in that in that reality? So and I think the dissonance between those emotions in and of themselves creates some level of anxiety. So I think it's a little bit day by day, to be honest.
Yeah, dichotomy, I think, is a great word to kind of frame up, I think, how we all are feeling, kind of like toddlers too. Things can change on a dime. Pete, how are you doing?
Well, I'm struck with gratitude that my children are 28 and 25 as I get on these Zoom and Teams calls every day and recognize the incredible challenges that parents are going through. And I think that there's two groups that especially worry me. Toddlers, which a few of you have, and the younger kids who actually need to be entertained by you or by someone. That's very difficult for people to pull off while they're trying to be an employee, a husband or wife, and a parent and a teacher and a referee at the same time. It makes me very nervous for the mental health of everybody. And we've spent a lot of time trying to talk about how do we support those people. And the biggest thing is just to let the people on our teams know that we get what they're going through. We're supportive. And if you need to back out of a call or jump out of frame, don't worry about it. We get it. It's not a distraction anymore. None of us are the BBC dad anymore. I think it's happened to everybody. So I'm particularly grateful that people have risen to that challenge and that people have been so gratifyingly supportive of each other. Everybody seems to be trying to figure out how to make things easier for their coworkers. And to me, that's one of the really nice things that's come of this. The other group of people I worry about are people that live alone. We tend to think about old people, but I've also seen in daily calls that I'm having that people who live alone, the isolation is starting to affect them differently than those of us with other people in our house. Sometimes we wish there weren't other people in our house, but having the option to be with people or not with people really is mentally really supportive. So I feel for the people who are alone, even if they're young. There's still that sense of you may choose to be alone, but you can choose to move out and go out and see your friends when you want to. And having that taken away, I think, is a challenge for people. But all in all, pretty good.
I think what you're saying, Pete, is so interesting. And what we've been talking about is that everyone has their own set of issues right now. Whether it is someone with small children, whether it is someone taking care of a parent, whether someone is alone, everyone has something that they are in right now, as well as performance at work, right? So it's all of this coming together. And I love what you said, and what I talk about and what we hear is, how can we help each other? How can we help? Right? There may be mornings where that's a really good time for me to be on calls. There may be afternoons. So it's really, what I'm seeing is the best of people coming together, the best of people coming to help each other at different times in different situations. It might not be someone's job necessarily to do biz dev right now, but maybe they're available. So maybe they'll take it on. So I'm really seeing a spirit, a strength You know, I was in New York during 9/11, and something magical happened at that time in New York. People started looking each other in the eye and saying hello. Now, as a New Yorker, that was insane. You just didn't do that. But there was such an amazing sense of togetherness. And that's what I'm feeling when I walk my dog with my mask. People are saying hello to each other, checking in, and the same thing at work. We're really seeing how we can help each other. And that is just really a beautiful thing that we're seeing.
Nice. No, I know. I think there's a lot of positives that are coming out of this, and you have to view that silver lining from that perspective. Otherwise, as you know, it can get a little bit daunting. I do want to kind of pivot though, and to hear about current challenges that this group is facing, and because I think our coworkers, our employees, you know, that perspective of what we're kind of viewing and what we're kind of seeing. From my standpoint, you know, GDP numbers came out today, almost 5% decrease. You know, Q2 from everything that we've like every webinar that I've been on is we can expect to have that be even more contracted. And I think that that's the thing that I'm challenged with the most of how it's going to affect our clients' business in the short term in Q2, and then also Q3 and Q4, depending on who you're talking to, depending on the sector that they're in, really helping them craft plans that make sense. But I think that's really we're just doing a lot of scenario planning on what that could look like. And for instance, a lot of our clients have media in live sports, and there is no live sports. So there's been a lot of just you know, trying to figure out how to fill holes in the interim while continuing to move our clients' business forward. But Erin, I would love to get your perspective on that first, just because also you're coming at it from a larger global perspective with TBWA.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The economic impact is very real. And, you know, in the first couple of weeks, we sort of braced. And I think in some ways naively thought, oh, okay, maybe this isn't going to impact some of our clients. And it is now sort of daily that we are seeing even clients who have actually seen increased demand for their product start to think about just general economic depression and consumer spending and consumer confidence, and sort of proactively change their plans and contract their budgets and their media investments. And we're obviously seeing that across the globe. And you know, for a global network, you know, part of what we have the benefit of doing is sharing learning. So, you know, we're looking closely at Asia as they have sort of started to come back already. What are they learning? You know, and what can we learn from that? You know, I think one of their big messages to us is don't rush it. You know, those who rushed it are often seeing setbacks. And so, you know, one of the real conversations that we're having right now is, you know, we might be starting to get to a point where things will move into the next phase of this, but are we ready? What should that look like? You know, how comfortable will people be getting back in the office, getting back on planes? You know, we're in this moment where we want to add extra value for our clients, but how do we do that when, you know, that face-to-face chemistry that we rely on might still be limited? How do we do that when teams have contracted? You know, at the beginning, we went into a flurry of proactive COVID related thinking. And quite frankly, since then, we've, you know, have less people. And so how do you maintain that level of proactivity while you're trying to sort of flex, you know, with sort of the ups and downs of your revenue structures? And you know, I think all of us in our previous comments spoke to how impressed we've been with people and how in some ways it's brought us together and we've been supportive. You know, how do you do that when you're also having very real, very difficult conversations for us on a global scale about the impact to our staff and our workforce? So, you know, we're feeling those pressures very acutely. And again, for a global business, you know, we saw Europe sort of react very dramatically and very quickly. And there are some learnings in that, but there's also the knock-on effect of being a global network and us all having to do our part to sort of, figure things out. So, luckily at TBWA, we are a collective. We're really sort of connected, and that sort of support system is culturally built in. So the same support we're seeing within our office locally, we're starting to see globally in terms of people reaching out. What can we do? How can we flow revenue? How can we support one another?
Now that's very interesting from the standpoint of don't rush it. I think that could have a lot of learnings for us with our own businesses here, and guidance from state and local governments on what the parameters are for reopening. I know a lot of us are probably spending a lot of time on reopen plans and what those look like, and they change by the day depending on what happens. But Thaz, how about you from a challenges perspective? Because from independence too, sometimes we look at things maybe a little bit differently, but there are a lot of commonalities.
We do. I think that one of the biggest challenges from a leadership perspective right now is the balance of short-term and long-term goals. Because obviously all of us came out this year, guns blazing, 2020 is our year, the era of perfect vision. And then we kind of all said, oh my gosh, this thing has hit us. And like, how do we flex and how do we adapt to the short-term needs? And obviously impacts on our business, impacts on our clients' business, but then continue the kind of optimism and the growth that 2020 still offers us. So it's that balance of short-term and long-term. And Erin, I totally relate to the how do we kind of keep that proactive energy up and keep people motivated to kind of continue through that side of things, whilst also kind of planning for our futures and making sure that we have a healthy business. So I think those are things that on an everyday basis and I think I don't know if you guys feel the same thing, but it's like the code switching, because you have to go from short term to long term pretty much in 15-minute intervals. And so I think it's a new skill that we all have to flex as leaders, but I think this is how organizations are going to work for a while. I think we're going to constantly need to balance this. I think, again, when you're smaller, we don't have that kind of, we don't have the same sort of kind of pressures around the, just staying really high level. We do have to kind of get into things as well. But I think that this is a really interesting moment for all of us independents as we really kind of look to flesh out what next year, or what the remainder of this year looks like, and what 2021 can look like as well.
Melissa, what about your challenges?
I think the challenge for us has been some of our clients have live events, sports clients, entertainment clients. So really accelerating that digital transformation, and what does that customer experience and interaction look like today? How do we leverage the power of technology for the human experience? It's really an interesting time to think about what experiences can look like, the physical space, the digital space, even thinking about education, right? I mentioned my daughter earlier who was going to kindergarten and now is online learning. So having that always need for connectivity, leveraging or creating content platforms, it's the challenge, but also the opportunity in that we get to look at communications, and creatives get to think about what's possible, even thinking potentially about the role of the car, right? In a social distancing way. How can a car be used inside and outside where people can come together, have an experience through specific activations, through digital or social, to really connect, right? So it's a challenge, but I go back to living in that possibility of what's possible. And it's accelerated. Things are accelerated right now. Last year I came to Sidley in November, and we were bringing 5 agencies together in different P&Ls, different geographies. And, we decided January 1, we're going to be in this together. And we were, but I'll tell you something, COVID happening, there's no geography anymore. It doesn't matter what office we're in, where you sit, we have access to everyone right now on a global level, which we had before, but now we truly have that. I can talk to someone in Paris just as easily as I could talk to someone in Culver City now. So the access to talent, to thought leadership, to really integrating has been accelerated. So it's as much of a challenge as it is an opportunity. And the challenge is the speed. It's what Thaz is saying, right? We are working on our current projects while also thinking of what the future of those projects are for our partners. So, yeah. That's what I got.
That's awesome. I mean, you talk about it's nothing's a gift right now, but what a gift from that learning standpoint of that collective, and really like there is the geographic boundaries. I think that's going to be a really interesting evolution that will come from it. So thanks. Pete, talk to me about your challenges that you're seeing.
Well, one of the
or that
biggest
haven't been discussed.
one of the biggest challenges I'm seeing is that apparently I touch my face all the time. And in Teams meetings has made me aware of it. So I'm trying not to do that. And that is very distracting for me. But corporately, I think as a large independent, we've got 700 people in 6 or 7 offices, but most of them are in Santa Monica. I'm grateful for one thing. Most of our business is in Santa Monica, in California, where the state and the city and county have actually, in my opinion, handled this as well as anyone. So I always look at this from how do we get out of this? And part of my fear about the way the government has responded is that our initial response from a federal point of view was stock market, business, people's health. And my attitude as a businessman, being a human, should be health, business, stock market, because I believe that if people are healthy, they'll be back at work. And if people are back at work, the stock market will be fine. Trying to address it by making people feel that the perception of business is better than it really is, isn't getting us anywhere. So I like the fact that we're being a little bit more open-minded with that. I think one of the challenges that we're all facing, and we've always been this way as services companies, as agencies, we can do an incredible job as leaders. We can do an incredible job as agencies, but the reality is we don't all have control over our businesses. We are completely at the mercy of the success of our clients, and we can contribute to the success of our clients and help them not fail. But there are some things we can't do. We can't open stores for Honda dealers. We can't get people back on Southwest Airlines planes right now. And I think that one of the challenges as leaders in this time is figuring out we've got to deal with things that we can't control, which we all hate. We like being able to fix things and control things. So that goes from there is, I think, an increased need for us to all be as transparent as possible and to communicate as much as possible, because all of our associates feel and see what's going on in business. So as much as possible, we're trying to help people understand how we're dealing with things and where we stand with things, so that not feeling like this stuff all happens in a black box somewhere. And I think being an independent, that's one of the pros and the cons. The pro is that we only have to answer to an owner or two. The con is we don't have a global network to lean on, and we can't just throw more stock into the stock market to raise more capital. So there's pros and cons to being an independent, but right now I certainly see them.
Right there with you. I know those pros and cons very well. And I think that what you're talking about in terms of that realignment of health and having that be the top priority is a good segue into, lessons that we've currently learned at this point. I think if we got on the Zoom in a week from now, we would have a whole nother set of lessons that we would have learned. But Erin, I think you really nailed it from a standpoint of what I've learned of like just viewing this a little naively. We came into this and I almost am a little bit, because I consider myself a pretty forward thinking, I can see 2 steps ahead, but when you're finding out from your kids' school that they're going to be closed until the end of April and you have no idea what's happening. So I think that was part of my thing is business owners and businesses in general were not given a lot of information up front. So of course we're thinking, and we've never seen anything like this before. So it's like, yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks. I mean, it's comical now that we were doing like a test from home. Let's see how we can do the test when we're all shutting down. So I was a little naive. And I think at the end of March, it's like really actively on defense. And now I feel like I'm on offense. Like I have to protect my employees. I need to do what's best for my clients. They need to have a plan. They need to hear from us on the fact that we're thinking about them. So I think, in fact, I wouldn't, be getting to the place where I am now. And I was on the phone with the, Chamber of Commerce, just really making sure that businesses are involved of what we need to provide to our employees. We need to have the city really support businesses if we want to reopen. So, I think that's my biggest lesson is, I kind of I took more of an active control with the information that I have, and I'm continuing to seek out more information. And because that's the way I think you're only going to get, point to making decisions. But Melissa, I'd love to kind of hear about, the lessons we've learned in the last few weeks.
The lessons we've learned in the past few weeks is listen to Jeff Alpin. Jeff Alpin lives in Seattle, Kings County to be specific. And Kings County in the US was very proactive about what to do. They had a quiet group and there was an outbreak there. So they immediately went into closing things down. So we closed things down in our offices before it was cool to do so. Before people were saying things like, "Are you crazy?" Like we got a lot of backlash actually. And I didn't want to do it, frankly, because I was worried about productivity, right? That's total honesty. I was worried, like, how is this going to impact our teams?
Same.
But what we were able to do, because we were doing it, was to test it a little bit. Okay, so what did we need? Everyone needed a Zoom account. We all had to make sure everyone had computer equipment and, simple little things like technology. But I think what I've learned and we've learned is something that Pete said: health has to come first. Because here's the truth. If we don't have our health, we have zero productivity. So taking care of our people is not only the right thing to do for humanity, but it's the right thing to do for our business. Because if we're not healthy, we can't do anything. So that has been a big learning for all of us. And again, we always want to do the right thing for people, but it's also the right thing for our business. So I think it's a little bit of a change into what productivity actually is and how productivity actually works. It doesn't mean that we have to be sitting in an office from early in the morning to late at night. We are learning a lot about flexible schedules here and embracing them. We are learning that there's many different ways people work, and we can actually be more productive by embracing that individual way of working. We're talking about going back to the office at some point, but we're going to change our entire office plan. We are not going to have places where people sit every day. We're going to be using our office for collaboration, for times when we come together, and we are really looking at how people can have more flexibility in their lives, frankly, for their joy. But that joy is also going to lead to increased productivity and the work that they put forward. So for me, it has been eye-opening, and I was definitely one of those cynical people to start, and this has really opened up my eyes to what's possible about the future of work.
Nice. Erin, how about you in terms of the lessons that you've encountered thus far?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big lessons we learned is to stop waiting for someone to tell you what the right answer is. And I think this may be, part of a product of being part of a network with a holding company. In those early days, we were sort of like, who's gonna, like, what, we have a sense of what we should do, but what is the governor saying? What's the mayor saying? Ultimately, what's the network saying? What's the holding company saying? And in that time, I think we started to do things we didn't feel were right, or in so much as we felt like we should be work from home probably earlier than we actually were. And so I think this time around, I think we as a leadership team feel much more empowered to assess the situation, take in all the inputs, but realize that only we know what's best for our agency and our clients and our culture. And we just have to act on that. Now, of course, we have to take guidance and work within structures, but that we should feel, much more empowered to sort of nurture the things that seem the most relevant to our group. And, as we think about health, one of the things that I think became very clear to us is that mental health, which we've talked about, is as important as physical health. And as we prepare to go back, our conversation, of course, is around increased sanitation and social distancing, but it's also around the level of anxiety that people will feel entering back in, even if we've taken all the precautions. And working parents, again, like we may have be able to go back to work, but the kids aren't going back to school. And we've started to ask ourselves, what are the advantages of being back in the office? And let's think through this really, really carefully, and again, not rush it. Even if things open up, let's try and really be thoughtful and agree 100% with Melissa. I think we have the confidence to have those conversations because the fear about lack of productivity was really shattered, and in fact, I think we saw probably increased productivity in certain areas. Yes, there are still some things for which you cannot replicate the dynamic of being in person, but many things we actually saw get done better. And we actually sort of saw the rise of the introvert. Oftentimes when we're in meetings, it's like, who's the loudest, who gets their point across through force. And I think we saw those folks who are a little more contemplative, who prefer to put pen to paper first, really sort of shine in this time. So, the education on different working styles, flex schedules, as Melissa said, I think we're trying to sort of figure out, like, how do we not sort of in this moment say, oh, we've had a lot of great learnings, and then the minute it opens up, rush back and get into business as usual? How do we really sort of be conscious and present with what we're learning so that we don't lose it? Because that happens so often.
Faz, what about you?
I think a lot of similar lessons, but I think one of the biggest lessons is around kind of imperfection, because this is really about not knowing everything and being okay with that. Particularly, I'm a relatively new CEO as well, and the idea of, that, Jean, when you were first talking about like thinking it was the first 2 weeks, I'm like, okay, great, we got a plan for this, and then realizing like, oh no, that's actually going to be wrong. And then, when we do our weekly all agencies, in my mind being like, oh my gosh, I don't have an answer for when we go back. Are people going to think, like, what, am I being a bad leader? What's wrong with, like, in fairness, it was a lot of like introspection around, like, am I doing the right things right now? And then realizing quite quickly that the entire world didn't know either. And being okay with some of these imperfections and not really knowing, and living in a world of ambiguity, which I think is a great skill for all of us, not just at the leadership level, but even as folks kind of working on the work as well. It's like everybody, I'm learning to work within this more ambiguous space, like productions. How are we going to actually execute on some of these? These are going to be, we went and we were really fortunate in that we kind of kept going. We didn't really have a minute to stop and be like, okay, this is all happening. We just kind of like that weekend we were supposed to be in a pre-production, and so things started, everything was adapting, but it adapted really quickly and without really a lot of ability to kind of think it through or overthink it. So I think for us, we were really, the lessons learned were really within this world of flexibility and ambiguity. How do we redefine what our agency offerings even are? I think that there's a huge amount of opportunity just within this. Like we're learning new ways of working, and it's not just about schedules and kind of meetings, but it's about what we can actually do as well. And I think that's a really exciting part of some of these lessons. And I think, again, none of us know. We depend on the scientists. We depend on the medical community. I think I'm fortunate, I come from a family of epidemiologists, which is weird, except for this time. So my brother-in-law is at the CDC. Like my whole family's been in this for a long time. So I've heard about things like this for a while. And it's an interesting thing because it's like family conversations, which is now
give us the scoop on that, Thaz. Give us the scoop. What's the family saying?
My sister also works at Gilead, which is interesting. But like there's, I think right now there's obviously, I am in full trust what science tells us. It is like for me personally, it is the way forward. And I think that there's huge kind of, there's things that are going to change forever. I think there's also things that should have changed probably years ago that we just simply were not paying attention to. And I think that will change. I think we've got a lot of, again, the CDC, everyone's working really hard at getting to solutions. They need time. And I think that's what part of all of this is about. Staying at home for all of us businesses, small businesses, global businesses. The reason why we need to do this is to let the scientists do what they need to do, because it wasn't that they were caught off guard, but there's never enough time to find bespoke solutions. So I think right now, if anything, like where I see where my family's perspective comes on all this is just like, we need to hold down whatever we can in the way that we've been doing it, particularly California, and kind of, again, allow science to take its course.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, science does not operate on pitch timelines. So I'm sure we're all just viewing it of like, come on, if we can do it, you can do it. But
Totally.
No.
And they're like, clinical trials. I'm like, which one are you on? And I'm like, how many do you need? Like, this like testing that we do for commercials? No, very different.
Yeah. Pete, what have you learned?
So I don't have any family members that are epidemiologists, but I do have family members who get emails from people who say they talk to an epidemiologist and they have all the answers. So I feel like I'm just as informed, but I mean, a lot of that stuff might not be accurate. I've been having this conversation with my father a lot. If it's been forwarded by more than 4 people, it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been interesting. But I think for me, the thing that has changed and will continue to change is work from home. Many of you who I've had this conversation with know I've been pushing for more work from home, telecommuting, any way that we can to increase the ability for people, especially in LA. We're leaders of agencies in LA. In LA, we put special pressure on our people because many of us are adding 3 hours a day of driving, or 2 hours a day of driving, or even if it's an hour of driving, and driving, not sitting on a train where you can be productive or where you can chill and calm yourself. We put people in cars and get them aggravated, and we make them drive to work. And those of you with small children have to deal with people trying to race home to get to daycare or trying to drop off. And to me, the more we can figure out as a community, as an industry, how do we reduce the number of people that have to drive to the office every day in the long run is great. And the fact that people who were scared to death of it are now becoming comfortable with it, to me, is fantastic. I think one of the things that really helps with that is having the right kind of technology tools, as we've all talked about. One of the things that I feel like has really been seamless for us is probably 2 years ago, we moved people into the Office 365 cloud and really leaned into a lot of the tools. And I know we all hate the evil empire of Microsoft, but it's not the evil empire anymore. And by the way, my golden retriever just joined me. I think that having all those tools together that make it really easy to just add a Teams meeting to a regular meeting has made it really seamless to be able to move from one thing to another. But I really believe that the work from home thing is going to continue. I especially think it's important if we're going to continue to try and find ways to grow the percentage of women and people of color in leadership and in agencies, because it is moms who are definitely generally facing the brunt of raising children and dealing with drop off and everything else. I've been very gratified to see that when we have this conversation in our agency, there are a lot of dads that are participating and commenting much more than usual. And I think it's just, you can't get away from it when everybody's in the house. So it's forcing people to change behavior in a good way. But I think that if we can help people who can't afford to live on the West Side be a better associate, live a better life, have a little bit of work-life balance, we're going to make our industry more attractive for people to join in the long run. So there's that. I think the other thing that I really hope will stay is I have found that over the last probably 5 or 10 years, as we've gotten more and more data, we find a lot of clients who are getting less interested in the point of view of the agency, more conversation around what consultants say, what the data says, and those kinds of things. And one of the things that we've all been talking about is agencies have been pushed way up the ladder in terms of their value within our clients' relationships again. And a lot of that is two of the most important things you can do right now as a company is figure out how are we communicating appropriately with our customers. The other is how are people responding to the way that we're acting? How are people responding to the way that we communicate? And agencies are at the front of that. So I've been really gratified to see clients that, especially CEOs and CMOs that maybe aren't in the day-to-day conversation, reaching back out and really wanting the opinion of those really smart strategic planners that we put on their business and really smart business people. So hopefully that renewed confidence in what agencies bring to companies will stay, and work from home. Those are the two things that I hope really come out of this as positives.
Yeah, no, that's a nice segue of kind of, we've been talking about kind of where we are right now, but looking towards the future and whether positives or negatives, what we're seeing. I know definitely, and Melissa, I wrote it down, the definition of productivity, my view has changed over the last 8 weeks. And I think we will probably be actively doing some of those types of tests in the next coming months. And I think that will be really interesting to take learnings from, and kind of create more, whether they're formal policies or not. But I definitely, we're going to, policies will be adjusted. I think that's a good thing. Erin, when you look to the future, what are you kind of seeing, or, what, and both of that dichotomy idea of the positives and the negatives, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaking to the dichotomy, we've seen clients sort of react in two ways. And interestingly, sometimes the same client is doing both, which is one, what Pete has said, which is really sort of relying on us. Again, in an environment where nobody has the right answer, there's no testing benchmark that is going to bail us out of this. They are sort of relying on our intellect, our understanding of how audiences behave, our sort of ability to solve problems creatively and adaptively and flexibly. All the things that are sort of core to agencies are, I think, becoming, much more relied upon, and sort of have reignited some of those upstream conversations. I certainly think we have been much more purposeful about thinking proactively about our clients' business. We always give sort of that brief to ourselves, but we are doing it in more potency than ever before. And I certainly think that will be a muscle that I hope sticks. At the same time, frankly, those same clients are the ones coming to us and saying, we need to cut back, and we're not going to cut scope. We just need you to cut your fee. Well, why? Well, just because, we're all sort of, this is the impact, and we all know that those things are not going to bounce back, next fiscal. There is going to be a long road to recovering those fees, and that is something, quite frankly, that I see as a part of our future that I'm pretty anxious about. And I think we're constantly trying to diversify our capabilities, and that feels like a pretty good insurance policy against that. But that doesn't change the reality that we have been reset in many instances. Our services have been more relied upon at the same time that we seem to be taking arbitrary hits to our profitability. And as certainly as a company that's part of a network and a holding company, I don't think their expectations are going to change come next year. We're all sort of in Q2 and Q3, people kind of understand where we're at. I don't know that is going to be a something that instantly bounces back as we head into next year. And so, the expectation versus the reality is something that is certainly keeping us up. I think, though, what we are sort of discovering is that some of these lessons that we're learning about reduced work weeks, flexible working schedules, more flex staffing might just be part of that solution. What at first seemed like a forced necessity, reducing people's work weeks, we're actually, a number of people who we approach to say, hey, does anybody want to take a step back? Oh, I definitely do. That works much better for me. We were like, well, why didn't you say that before? Oh, because I didn't want to lose my job. It's like, oh, well, actually, if that works better for you, it works better for us. And so I think there's been a little bit more transparency about, you know, how we can work differently. And I think that's going to be critical to us being able to solve some of the sort of maybe economic challenges that we're facing coming out of this.
Yeah, I mean, how many debates or things have we listened to? Is it V-shaped? Is it U-shaped? Is it a Nike swoosh? What's the recovery look like? And again, no one knows anything. And I think that's the idea where I take solace in, is no one actually knows. And but it was interesting. I was on a webinar and hearing Martin Sorrell and his take, which is very optimistic, but it was interesting because he asked, the response of governments was appropriate. What the governments did, they should have done. But it was the reason why we're operating this way it was drastic because we were underprepared. Mm-hmm. We were not prepared as a country, as a society, and how to handle this. So I also think that's the idea. Now we're talking about people, you know, this is going to come back. We need to update from your family, but
it's coming back in the winter.
It's coming back in the fall. It's coming back in the fall. So what are we doing, you know, from that standpoint of really being prepared from a public health perspective, to make sure that we can work through it again, but not to the degree of, you know, what we're having from an economic impact. You know, that's what I'm looking forward to, seeing more proactivity from the federal government once they kind of get through this, you know, current state that we're in, of how are we going to change things.
Yeah, federal government.
I know that's a whole nother webinar. We don't even need to get into that. But, you know, as you look to the future, Thaz, kind of what are you kind of seeing as those opportunities and obstacles that we're all encountering right now?
I think one of the things that, you know, again, one of the themes that's come up a lot today is the idea of flexibility and agility. And we've been talking about that since forever. It's like the agile agency, but now it's real. Like now this is the waterfall process actually doesn't work as well anymore because we're in this environment. And I think the idea that we're able to not only flex our internal processes, but also the way that we look at the kinds of work we do, we've changed. I can say we're changing the way we look at different RFIs today. It's like, oh, actually, we can solve that in a different way, and maybe maybe these are new kinds of capabilities we can explore that our agency can take on. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because we're going to be asked to flex in ways that we have never been asked to flex before. And I think it's daunting, but it's really exciting as well, because what it's telling us is like the market is changing forever. Our outputs will change forever. And that's not necessarily bad. It's also not saying that all the things that we did 3 months ago are going away forever. They're not. They'll come back in different shapes and forms. And some of them will come back pretty much intact in the way that we thought of them. But I think the real wins for agencies are going to be the ways that you're able to partner with different kinds of organizations to solve problems, even like just knowing where you bolt on, where you partner with other people, to really kind of expand your set of expertise. Because I think that's what clients are going to be looking for in the future, is new kinds of solutions, because as now more than ever, that whole like promised land of the future of agencies, we're sort of here. Yeah. and I think that, you know, again, it's like good, bad, or otherwise, we're all everyone on this call, everyone in this industry, we're in it together. And I think the idea of like shared learnings as we get them is going to be really important, because we're going to need a repository of different ways to solve problems. And that sort of stuff, I've always felt very much inclined to be that information needs to be democratized. Like sharing that doesn't hurt you. It doesn't hurt you to kind of share how you're doing things, if it works or if it doesn't work. And I think those are fundamental shifts that will happen, because, you know, I think a few of us have said it today, we're more connected than we've ever been, and it's for the best.
Well, we only have 10 minutes left, Susan, and I want to leave some time for questions. And I think those are coming through Susan.
Hello, everybody. Great conversation. I could keep on listening, but we do have a couple of questions that came in that I want to talk about that I think are interesting. One of them is about timing related to vendors re-engaging, and there's a similar question that came in for people who are actually looking for jobs and young people getting into the industry. So all those vendors and partners that you've worked with over the years, when's the right time for them to start knocking on your door again? I'd love to hear about that.
Well,
Melissa, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I think that similar to our vendors and the clients and the purchases from our clients, people aren't necessarily reluctant to buy right now. They're just unable. So I think more than ever, it's really important to maintain those connections and those relationships. So I would think about how, if any, one can help during this time. What are your creative ideas? What are creative solutions? I think Procter & Gamble, who is a client of ours, they think it's an opportunity right now to seize the market, right? They think actually this is the time to grow the share of their voice while other people might not have the possibility. So I think relationships right now are so important. So I say stay in touch, reach out, see how people are doing, because everything is about relationships, right? So continue to reach out. Now is a good time. And, I remain very optimistic about this too is going to pass. This too shall pass, rather. Our friends over in Asia right now, they are getting on the other side of this. They're starting to see a surge in their business. So don't rush it, like Erin said, but I think continuing to reach out is really important.
Great input there. Pete, there's a question specifically for you related to the auto industry. So how are you seeing any different response from your auto clients than from your other clients, since no one's driving right now? Did we lose Pete?
I think we might have lost Pete.
Might have lost Pete. All right, let's pop into a different one. So this is an interesting question. How is the currency of trust being calibrated by your organizations? Trust with your teams, clients trust in you, and trust in the effectiveness of ads you're putting into market. Any thoughts on that?
I think trust is, it's paramount to relationships, and how you strengthen that is through communication. I think that the really important thing right now is over communicating, and I'm sure all of us have said this a million times, but making sure that you kind of keep things consistent, because that's the part that you lose with the interpersonal bits of being able to walk in the hallways, chat in the kitchen, all of that stuff. When you don't have that anymore, the ability to kind of have some consistency within communication can then build some of that trust, particularly for internal purposes. And it's the same thing with clients, is making sure that the communication is consistent and clear. And again, sometimes like repeating yourself 14 times to make sure that everything is not only kosher, but like just again, reinforcing kind of the clarity that you're getting out of some of these very long Zoom calls.
I think for us, we have found, we talk a lot to our clients about, finding the soul of their brand, really understanding their brand vision, these kinds of things that sometimes they don't have as much interest in when they're in, hardcore conversion mode and the messaging is more functional. We've seen many of our clients have to sort of kind of ask, well, what do we stand for? Because where can we appropriately enter the conversation? And actually, this isn't an appropriate time to be conversion forward. And so what kind of message, should we be putting out there? And so I think it has in some ways reminded them of why they trust us, because as their partners in stewarding the brand, a lot of those things that we are preaching are proving valuable now. And so, I do think that has helped some of the trust between clients. Some of the things that we say that can often feel, self-motivated or self-indulgent, they're saying, oh, okay, all right, now I do understand why it's important for my brand to have a clear and authentic sense of who they are. And I think that extends to how we as leaders are relating to our people. You know, that trust is I think something that we've been really conscious about, because they are looking for direction. There is a lot of uncertainty. There is anxiety. And yeah, we've just relied on transparency and over communication to say, you know, you might not actually like what I'm saying,
Right.
but you'll know that it's honest and it's true, and it's you know, with as much integrity and respect for your humanity as I can possibly have. And we found that that has been pretty well received, even if the message we're delivering is one that's hard to hear.
Right, in a time where the client agency relationship's been so strained, right? Trust being paramount. Now we are kind of forced into a different world of trust and transparency that we've needed, I think, for a long time. So one of the good outcomes of this. Pete, I see you're back on. Can you hear me?
I do hear you. I see everybody.
Awesome.
My neighborhood actually just lost internet, so I'm on a mobile connection now. First time this has happened since we've been working from home.
Nice rebound, Pete.
Yeah, anyway, go ahead.
There was a question about whether the your auto client, right, are they responding and reacting differently than your other clients, right? They've got a long lead, a long game there, but they're having an immediate impact. Is there a different type of response, and how are they pivoting to address the situation?
Well, one thing I've seen, if you watch TV or if you read the trades, the automotive clients are more optimistic than most. And I think that part of that is auto needs to be optimistic, because we've been talking about a couple different things with the economy right now, right? Is this recession, or is this people just practicing austerity because revenue's down right now? So there's a certain amount of, is this just keep your powder dry, is the term I keep hearing, that people are keeping their money and holding it so that they can use it when they know things are okay? Or is this the beginning of a more long-term recession? I tend to feel like we're someplace a little bit in between.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that the economy recovers faster, but until it's safe for everybody to get back to their jobs, most of us are doing exactly the same job. We're just not in the office. There are lots of jobs in America where people can't get in. So I think cars are something that people need when they're not home. Cars are something that they need when they have to commute. And if people aren't commuting and are staying home, they don't need them as much. But I think the car business has a lot of ingenuity. They also have a lot of financing options to throw at people. So we'll see. The federal government's talking about another cash for clunker program, which worked in the last recession. But I think one of the things that makes me a little bit nervous about this in particular is that people keep talking about, oh, well, after 9/11, this happened. Oh, well, after the recession in 2008, this happened. After the crash in the 20s, this happened. The reality to me is none of those are good models for what we're going through right now. So this continual comparisons to models of the past is ridiculous in a lot of ways, because none of those things had the effect that what we're going through right now has. So I really like when people take a look at those other models and then apply what we know to be different about this. And I actually think Andrew Cuomo did a really good job of talking about, when we talk about getting back to work, you think about two things. What can you do to get the people that are most essential to work? And then you get those people back to work as soon as possible, right, by reducing the risk for them. Then you talk about the people who have very little risk. You know, park rangers, they don't have a lot of risk. They're not in contact with that many people in close proximity. Golf courses, there's lots of things where people can get back. It's all those people in between that we kind of need to worry about. So sorry, long answer for automotive.
No,
but automotive is making a lot of effort, and I think that they will be very aggressive, because keeping plants open is so important to their business models and their ability to be sustainable, that they're going to do everything they can to keep the plants rolling. And most of them across the country are reopening in the next 2 weeks.
Wow. Thank you very much. I'm gonna, one last question here too before we wrap up, because I think it's kind of interesting. So we've been talking about getting back to work, getting our people back in the office, but we still produce ads and TV spots and video and whatnot. And so from a production end of things, Have you spent time, I'm guessing, yeah, spent time kind of looking at what it would be like to go back into production on things where you have crews and travel and things like that? How's that impacting you guys? Anyone?
I can go. I mean, we just had, we were having production conversations this morning. I mean, it's a week by week basis of, you know, when the stay-at-home orders get lifted and then when permits can be given. You know, we're getting pitch decks from production companies in Iceland and Sweden that have really kind of opened up production capabilities. But I think the thing that we're educating our clients on is production, how it has happened is not going to happen like that in the future. So just starting that education of it's going to take longer because the process is going to take longer. And I think you'll see a lot of a move. I mean, we're seeing it on all the ads now. We're in it all in it together, you know, sad piano music. But I'm excited to get us kind of out of that point where we can actually be creating, but letting clients know that there's going to be just realities around it. And you talk about an industry right now that's totally devastated and just waiting for the green light to go as production. And it's important for us to remember our trusted production vendors who have gotten us through some tight spots. So, you know, that's what we're continuing to do too. But it's a case by case basis and it's week by week. And like, so we have a client that TaylorMade's one of our clients. Golf courses are opening next week. So when can we shoot on golf courses? It's like, not for a while.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I think it's definitely.
Go fast. Yeah.
Go ahead,
I
Tess.
think it's definitely a week by week situation when you think about live action. But I think the big thing is also what is our new creative palette, and thinking about different things that are outside of just shooting. Like what are opportunities within motion and animation and other things when you're thinking about video assets, but also just, again, I think this is where you have these beautiful creative renaissances where you're able to kind of play with a new palette. And I think that that's going to be really interesting. And I've seen a lot of our production partners kind of start to ebb and flex in new ways as well, and kind of bring to the table some interesting different kinds of solutions. So I think that's going to be part of what we do too. And I think it's really like we still have to invent new solutions. Like I don't think even what we have right now is enough. I think we can keep pushing beyond that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that obviously digital is mostly done in-house by most of us. So most of the forms of digital production are going forward just like they always did, except people are doing them in their own houses instead of our house. Print is actually, to me, the biggest struggle because we actually look at physical assets. So that's been a little bit of an issue. Luckily, there isn't as much of it going on, so it's not that hard. I think I agree with everybody that the return to big video production in the near future isn't going to happen, certainly locally, at least not until we get better antibody testing, better vaccination or something that will give people the sense that they're safe. There is no essentialness to creating a big budget production that makes it worth risking anybody's health. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. For me, it's actually been interesting. The media side of our business is busier than normal. And people say, well, how can that be? Because we're cutting budgets. And the fact is, when you cut budgets, it's the same as when you add budgets. We're actually, if a client says we have $100 million, you go out and you plan it, and then you negotiate and buy it. And what's happening right now is a client says, well, we don't have 100 anymore, we have 80. The strategic teams are actually replanning the whole schedule for what does it look like as a value at 80, and then they renegotiate their way out of those. And for those of us that have tried to renegotiate their way out of a big NBC or Google or Facebook contract right now, everybody's asking for money, everybody's asking for relief. So it's actually, the media community is busier than normal, even though money's coming out of the market.
Thank you, guys. I feel like the conversation could keep going. Lots of good insight from everybody. Thank you for being open and candid. You can't believe the feedback we get when we have conversations like this. People just want to understand and kind of feel that everybody's sharing this a bit. So I appreciate your time and your energy, and again, your thoughts in the future. It is a tough and challenging time, but I do think there's some great things waiting for us on the other side of this. So let's be part of that. Before we wrap up, just a couple things I want to remind you. We do have a couple great programs next week. We have on Tuesday, we have a program on getting stuff done, right? It's a class to improve your focus and efficiency, something I think we could all use right now. And our next Think Thursday is Better Than Before, from Preference to Purpose. And that's with Kirk Souter and Leisha Reste. It's talking about taking this time of crisis and using it as an opportunity for transformation. So I encourage you all to register online. Both those programs are free. You can go to thinkla.org to register for those. We will be sending out a survey after this. We want your feedback. It helps us continue to create great programming. Thank you all for your time. Thank you, panelists, and thank you for everyone for showing up. We had a great turnout today. And please take good care of yourself. Pete, stop touching your face.
Can't do it. And
Yeah,
one
I
last
touch
thing
my face constantly.
from the
I've learned that
ThinkLA
lesson
community.
too.
Happy birthday, Susan.
Oh.
Susan celebrated a birthday this week.
Thank you very much,
Happy
Pete.
birthday.
We forgot to organize a parade and drive by your house.
There's still time. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Great to see you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.